right. Returning to the councils, we move on from the Second Council of Lyon to the Council of Vienne. In order to understand a little bit about what the issues were at the Council of Vienne, we're actually going to have to go back a little ways before we can move forward, because we have to try to understand who the Knights Templar were. The Knights Templar were founded around 1119 by a group of knights who decided that what was needed is a group of knights to protect and guide pilgrims in the Holy Land. While pilgrims were in the Holy Land, traveling from holy place to holy place, they needed protection from a group of knights. They were inspired by the earlier foundation, the Knights Hospitaller, otherwise known as the Knights of Malta, which are still military. They're the last order of chivalry still in existence today, dating right back to the Crusades. Right? So the order of the Knights of Malta, who, and just as their original name suggests, Knights Hospitaller, they ministered to the exhausted pilgrims within the city of Jerusalem. They would have done, they would have cared for them. If anybody was sick, they would be the ones that would take care of them. And so that's the Knights Hospitaller. But the Knights Templar were much more a fighting organization. Right? The founder was Burgundian knight Hugh de Payan, and a knight from northern France, Godfrey of Saint-Omer. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience before the then Patriarch of Jerusalem, who would have been a Latin patriarch at the time. The king of Jerusalem at the time, the western king of Jerusalem, Baldwin II, turned over to the knights a part of his palace, which is believed to have been part of the Temple of Solomon. Hence, their names, when they came to take a name, was Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. So these knights dedicated themselves selflessly to the defense of the holy places. They become famous, their fame travels across Europe mainly through the preaching of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. He's instrumental in broadcasting their fame, especially in his writing De Laude Nove Militia, concerning praise of the new knighthood. And he writes that in 1128. It gains them a lot of fame throughout Western Europe, and the order begins to increase in both its size and its wealth. The members initially were members of the knightly class who gave all their possessions to the order generally. Members could be also could be anything from earnest knights who genuinely desired to just give it all away and serve the Lord by defending the holy places, to excommunicated knights who wished to rehabilitate themselves through joining this religious order. The order was approved at the Council of Troyes on January the 13th, 1128, at which Hugh, the founder, appeared in person, and their rule, written by Bernard of Clairvaux, was considered and approved. The Templars then from that time wore the mantle of the Cistercians, the long dark brown cape, which was added a distinctive red cross which they wore on the cape. The order was established in many kingdoms of Christendom before 1153. So the order becomes wealthy quickly. Just think of this, the fame of and the romance of a group of fighting men who dedicate themselves to poverty, chastity, through poverty, chastity, and obedience to the defense of the holy places. So, and the fact that most of these people are are knights, all right? So, of the knightly class. So the upper classes are going to be very keen on supporting them. All right? They get lots of royal benefactions. They also, because their vow of poverty means that they own everything in common, their possessions are pooled together, right? And if you're from the knightly class, it's presumed that there are a lot of possessions there. So they become very wealthy very quickly. Yes?
Can I ask you this? Right now there's one in Chicago, Knights Templar.
Knights Templar.
Yeah, Knights Templar or something. There's a group there.
Right.
They help people. They're like Knights of Columbus.
All right. Yeah, the Knights Templar per se, this particular group, like in the way in which they were founded, they died out, and actually this council is part of that. Is part of that.
So they are up there in Chicago.
Yeah. From the 14th century on, they ceased to be as an organization, and part of that is caught up in the story of this council, which is why I just want to give you a little bit of background about the Knights Templar.
And you said that they were persecuted by one of the French kings.
Philip the Fair, Philip IV of France, who was no friend of the church. With the fall of Jerusalem to the Muslims in October of 1187 and the failure of any further crusades, there was a waning of the Crusader spirit throughout the 13th century. And military orders begin to become anachronistic. They begin to fall. I mean, their whole reason for being is consistently they're deprived of that reason for being by the capture of the fall of Jerusalem and eventually the ejection of Christians from the Holy Land in 1291. Other religious military orders sought new goals. So, for example, the Knights of Malta, whom I mentioned, returned to their original work of tending to the sick, caring for the sick. As a matter of fact, the Knights of Malta in Germany run the ambulance service on the Autobahn. Right? So there are still members of the minor nobility. It's admission by invitation only from members who are already knights. And also the St. John's ambulance, which you might have heard of, which uses the Maltese cross, is really an adaptation from the Church of England, the Episcopal Church, of this same mission along the same lines. So that's where we get St. John's ambulance from. Anyway, the Templars, however, didn't seek these new goals. They seemed to be about to become a standing international mercenary force at the disposal of anyone who had the most to offer them. So they retired to Paris and London, where the temple, their base of operations, their houses they would always call the temple, right? For the Temple of Solomon. The temple becomes a depository of their wealth, at which princes and commoners banked their private property. And even the royal funds of France were deposited there. So they become a huge international financial powerhouse. Okay. In 1285, Philip IV Fair of France